Welcome to week 9 and chapter 10 of our Romans study. We're going to jump right in. Do any of you know what an abacus is? An abacus is this really ancient form of the calculator. It's one of the first forms of the calculator that's been known. What it is this series of strings and beads with 10 beads on each string to help people do addition and subtraction. And what's interesting about this is this came out about 600 or 700 years ago. That's when it first came out as this tool that people could use. And for a long time, it was really useful. It helped people be more accurate with the numbers that they were doing, with the money that they were using. But the problem is, though, that if you were to pull out an abacus today, you would find it seriously lacking. If you were trying to do some kind of complex math today and you pulled that out, you would find it very frustrating compared to what we now have in a calculator. Now, this illustrates something about what Paul is talking about in chapter 10. When you find something that's new and helpful and good and does what the old thing did but much better, it seems kind of silly not to use the new thing. But this is exactly what the Jewish people were doing that Paul was talking about in chapter 10. Take a look. I know what enthusiasm they have for God, but it is misdirected zeal. For they don't understand God's way of making people right with himself. Refusing to accept God's way, they cling to their own way of getting right with God by trying to keep the law. For Christ has already accomplished the purpose for which the law was given. As a result, all who believe in him are made right with God. So what Paul is talking about there is a case of misdirected zeal. It would be silly, we would say, for a mathematician or a scientist or an accountant or a person that does the books for a particular business to go and pull out an abacus to do all of their stuff. To be so excited about an abacus that they would forego the benefits of a calculator seems very silly. In the same way, it's also silly to believe and act like you have to fulfill and meticulously follow all of the laws of the Old Testament, when in reality there's a new way that's much better and much more life-giving. Now, this new way is actually quite simple, quite direct, and available to all of us. Check out what Paul says. In fact, it says, the message is very close at hand. It is on your lips and in your heart. And that message is the very message about faith that we preach. If you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Like the difference between a calculator and an abacus, this new way offers a fresh new way of living, a fresh new way of conducting your life and of knowing your place before God. And it involves two different things. For starters, number one, to believe that God raised Jesus from the grave. You are believing that God has power over sin and death, and that he will fill you with that power and free you from sin and death. And additionally, the second part of it is this, is as you proclaim that Jesus is Lord of your life, you now begin to follow him with your life instead of following any other person or thing. And that directs your life in a brand new direction. This new life that has an eternal sense to it, an eternal destiny to it. In doing those two things, you are trusting God. Trusting God with your eternity, trusting God with the direction of your life, trusting God with every part of yourself. Now, it's your turn. As you read through chapter 10, there are a few questions we should take a look at as we do so. Like always, ask yourself, what jumped out at you as you read this chapter? And how does what you read challenge you to transform the way you think? In what ways does this transformed way of thinking translate into living differently? And then specifically for chapter 10, what are the laws and rules you think you have to zealously follow in order to be in right standing with God? Number 2, how does calling Jesus Lord instead of anyone or anything else Lord shift the way you live your life? And finally, what better result does this new system of following Jesus produce in your life now? Thanks for checking out our video study of Romans. We're going to post one of these every single week on Monday. And as we do, we hope this is a chance for you to be transformed by God as you study what he says in the book of Romans and not just conform to whatever's around you. Hope you have a great week.